hello and welcome to episode number 309 of the Plain Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and on today's massively packed show, we learn that everyone's favourite low-cost airline is still committed to Chinese-built aircraft. The bleak story of the 737 MAX continues, and could there be more sad news on the horizon as troubled budget carrier struggles to make ends meet? Matt talks to Jenny about what it's like living in Rome as COVID-19 restricts the movements, and APG's resident doctor prescribes some good old-fashioned common sense. And finally, in the military news this week, the Scottish coast is buzzed by 6 fighter jets as an uninvited guest makes a visit. And are B-2 stealth bombers making a return to RAF Fairford? Well, joining me this week, as always, in the PTUK studios, pushing all the right buttons and moving all the correct sliders, it is, of course, the legend that is Matt Smith.
I mean, of course, there is the obvious joke there, isn't it? It's like I'm pushing all the right buttons, but not necessarily in the right order.
Well, you're pushing my buttons.
Right, thank you. What a real treat for everyone.
How is the world of Matt?
Yeah, it's all right, thank you. Yeah, lots of buttons to press. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Matt, I'm loving the T-shirt because that brings back some very, very, very good memories of our trip to Pittsburgh.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, obviously, as we have a bit of APG alumni here, I felt the need to.
3 years ago that was, Matt.
Oh,
3 years ago we've done the Pittsburgh
thing. I feel old enough already. Thanks for that.
But
how did that happen?
I know. So for those of you who are watching the YouTube stream, may have noticed a certain guest we have joining us here in the PTUK studios this week.
On, we'd have never seen you.
It is, of course, he doesn't really need any introduction at all because everyone knows this person.
He's infamous, that's what he is.
Famous. It's everyone's favourite Santa Claus. It is, of course, Captain Nick.
Now, I hope you lot have got rid of this virus.
No. You're in a part of the world where there are officially no cases at the moment. I should stress. Absolutely, it's 100% friendly. Anyway,
Nick, what has brought you to this far-flung neck of UK?
A major navigational error.
Right, fair enough. Yeah.
I foolishly volunteered to give one of my lectures to the Royal Aeronautical Society up this end. In fact, I discovered that it was an offshoot of Orville Wright's Appreciation Society. It was, like 2 centuries old. No, seriously, I was up at RAF Marham doing a talk to the Royal Aeronautical Society. They're a lovely bunch of people. And my second time there, so they invited me back, which was really nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, get you.
So when I looked at the map, I actually had to go and find one from the 16th century to see this part of the country. I discovered that...
Slightly offended.
I discovered there was an ancient settlement, a Bronze Age or perhaps even Stone Age settlement.
Actually, while you're talking about that, I'm gonna try something new here. Look, I'm gonna press this button here. We had a comment from Adam Spink in the chat room. Look there, it says, "How much coal did you burn to get to Norfolk, Nick?"
I wasn't burning coal. I was using Al's gas.
Oh, right.
Special new, very green. Method of driving your car. It works wonderfully. It only goes in fits and starts though, or stits and never mind.
Family show, ladies and gentlemen. Family show.
I burnt considerably less, I'm sure, than it costs to create the electricity that fills that young air traffic controller's motor car.
Okay, oral. Oh, brace yourselves, everyone.
Considering he seems to waste most of it going from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and back to 0 again.
Yeah, but if you can, why wouldn't you?
Well, that's a good point, yes.
Mind you, actually, in London, you're certainly not doing that in London. Oh, because it's green, it's,
I'll tell you what, Matt, my driveway at home is looking rather nice at the moment.
Is it?
Yeah, it's got this gorgeous, beautiful red new car park.
It's blocked in now.
It's blocked in.
Escape.
He's keeping it now. That's how he plans to.
Yeah, the TriStar van's in front of it.
Right. Okay.
So we have also got another incredibly important guest, a VIP guest on the show this week, and we are so happy to welcome back onto the show because we haven't had him on for a while. So welcome back, the King of Wit, the king of comedy.
I beg your pardon?
I said wit.
Oh, just checking.
It is, of course, Captain Al.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry about big lights above my head. That's not really my halo. It's just I've had to throw this together at the last minute. I wasn't in a position where I thought I could make the show, but I've managed to shuffle a few things around. Now, we were talking about those electric car drivers and their 0 to 60 time.
Here we go.
What's more impressive about an electric car is when it runs out of juice on the motorway, is its 70 to 0 time is almost zero.
Right. Yes.
They don't just sort of gradually wind down. They come to a screeching halt wherever they run out of juice. It's like being on the dodgems when the power goes off. You know,
Gentlemen, please, I need to have a word with you, please. It's the first time that we've had Adam in the chat room live for a very long time. Will you all stop offending him, please? Just play nice, the lot of you.
No, he knows I love his car. If only that big damn screen wouldn't keep banging my elbow, my knee, I'm sorry, when I was in the passenger seat. Lovely car.
Beautiful car.
Anyway, welcome, Al. It's great.
So welcome, Al.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much, yes.
So it is, what is it? It's the 13th of Friday, the 13th
Unlucky
today.
for some.
Blimey.
Yeah.
Time
Wouldn't
just
it just be?
Yeah, quite.
Time just coming up to 7 minutes past 7 on this evening. Welcome to everyone who has joined us in the live YouTube chat room this evening. Loads of people in there tonight, Matt.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like
Even Adam. Yeah,
mass
even
gathering.
Adam.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the usual family members in there. Chris Griggs, hello. Masha, hello. Tanya is also Tanya W in there. Hello to you. Stephen Howland, hello to you. Richard Adams, Chris Griggs. We've got Evan Shue. Hello to you, Evan. My God, it must be like minus 400 in the morning there or something.
Minus 400
James
in the morning.
Russell, hello to you, James. Dr. Steph is also in the chat room, obviously, because
actually she's got a slight bone to pick with us. Actually, here we go. I'll pop that up on the screen though. Can you all just stay only 4 hours ahead of us? Works out much better for my work schedule in terms of being able to join in the live show.
What a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good point. Isn't it?
I got a little bit concerned there, Matt, where you started putting Steph and Bone in the same sentence.
Moving on.
I was wondering where you were going.
And moving on, Aspire Pilot, hello to you as well.
Wow, where are we?
Room.
Well, what is the time exactly? It's 7:08, and I'm already having a nervous breakdown.
Keeping an eye on things in the chat room this evening with a blue spanner of death.
No.
It's our main man, Micah.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, I thought you were going to talk. I was going to say Nev was there.
No.
Absolutely.
No. As you may have noticed, Nev cannot join us this week. He's at home, busy sorting a few things out at home, isn't he? He's sort of
busy time,
busy
times
for him.
yeah.
So Nev's sorting a few things out at home, and obviously with the effects of this damned virus thing going around, obviously flights are being cancelled left, right, and centre. But it's safe to say that we've got a full packed show to come this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We haven't got any Armando either, unfortunately. However, we do have him by video, as we have done on several occasions, and he has treated us to a little intro. So we'll let him give his apologies himself, shall we?
Hey guys, I just wanted to check in. I'm not able to be on the show today. Just kind of give you an update on this interesting time of uncertainty in airports and travel and airlines. I know we're going to do a couple stories, but sort of on the ground reporting here at my home airport in Pittsburgh, there are largely no passengers. It's kind of empty, which is great because there's no line at the coffee shop, there's no line in the restaurants. But it makes commuting easy. I don't live here in Pittsburgh. I live in Charlotte, so it's been nice and easy to get on some flights. I've seen a pretty significant reduction, probably good 25, 30% reduction in passengers on most of the flights that I've been on. But again, sorry I can't be on the show. I'm flying today, and I'll see you guys next week for sure.
Oh, goody. We have missed you, mate. We really have. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that video. Do you see the way the airplane flew in one ear and came out the other? That's great. I don't know how you do
Gemma's
that.
always saying that about me.
Yeah, well, the less said about that, the better.
Moving swiftly on. So we've got lots to do, and we also have got a very special event happening after the show tonight that we've got to attend. Yeah. You know, the eating of food.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
I know. So
I'm very jealous, gents. Very jealous.
Oh, well, I mean, have you got time to get here before?
yeah, if you left now, Al.
Yeah, he'll be 3
no,
hours
it's not
late.
APG, is it? No.
What?
3
you
hours.
get there
I see what you did there. Anyway, right.
Anyway,
we need to do some stories.
We
Come on,
are going to
children.
start the
Yes.
show then, as we do each week, with our rundown of the weekly news from around the world and the UK. So if we're all ready,
Yes.
let's go. So, kicking off this week's first news story on the irishtimes.com. And the headline, oh my word, man caused pandemonium on Aer Lingus flight with hoax coronavirus claim. God, as if this couldn't get any worse. So, a Dutch trainee driving instructor who caused pandemonium on an Aer Lingus flight to Dublin when he made a hoax kind of a coronavirus claim.
What now?
Coronavirus. Beer virus.
Okay.
He's been given a 2-month prison sentence. Former boat captain and ski instructor Job van der Broek, who was 30, don't know why that means anything at all, relevance, but with addresses in, well, he's got, anyway, blah, 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 pleaded guilty on Thursday to an air rage charge after he had delayed Wednesday's flight EI-605 from Amsterdam because he would not end a phone call. He was flying to Ireland to get a connecting flight to Los Angeles to propose to his girlfriend. And sentencing, he said, Van der Broek thought there were special rules for him and he told a fiction to the flight attendant that his mother had the coronavirus. The accused buried his head in his hands as the sentence was handed down. However, the business graduate was granted appeal bail, which he took up soon after the hearing. Van der Broek refused to get off his phone after a cabin crew pleaded with him to finish his call so they could give the standard flight safety demonstration. He later lied to cabin crew, telling them that his reason for using his phone was because his mother had the virus and that he'd been in contact with her. He would not deny it if it had to, or the court was told. The cabin crew were reduced to tears and pandemonium broke out among passengers. Judge Conal Gibbons said his crime was unbelievable, while the world was in a state of fear and anxiety because of COVID-19. He described the case as the most exceptional of exceptional circumstances. The aircraft touched down at Dublin's Airport Terminal 2 at 1:49 p.m. on Wednesday, and it arrived 21 minutes ahead of schedule and was put into quarantine for HSE inspection to be carried out as a result of the scare.
I mean, this is a horrendous story, isn't it? Really, I mean,
with the current, the way things are
absolutely.
in this,
the way things are at the moment, the people are so stressed
yeah.
about this whole thing. I mean, I mean, it's sort of, you might as well have said bomb. Frankly, I mean,
exactly.
it's less of an issue now. I don't know. This is just what a stupid thing for someone to do.
Yeah, well, he's faced the consequences now because obviously he's.
Is it long enough? That's the question.
I would have thought a nice big fat fine would have been better.
Right.
A few pounds to...
Well, I don't know. A bit of jail time it never looks good on the record, does it? It doesn't look great on the CV.
Any thoughts?
It doesn't look good on mine, that's for sure.
No.
Well, no, quite. Should we try Al on this one? Brace yourselves, everyone.
Well, Al would have just booted him off.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone through various phases with this virus where... initially people were skeptical of the severity of it, and we were all sort of kind of being optimistic and making light of it. But the geography has changed quite considerably in recent times, and it has now become an exceptionally serious event, and that's what we have to deal with. So, the point has been crossed where it's no longer humorous, I think. We can all still be reasonably optimistic, and a lot of us, myself included, are, glass half full rather than half empty. But, every year there are idiots who make jokes about bombs on aeroplanes. So I'm not particularly surprised that this has happened, just rather disappointed.
Yeah, it's it's when people are so concerned as well. I think it's just such a stupid thing to do, isn't it? But interestingly enough, just some of the key points that the judge was saying. The judge actually said there would be one worse thing to say on a plane, and that there was a bomb under the seat. He also remarked that his actions were designed to put fear and anxiety into the minds of people on the plane, and I think he certainly did that.
Yeah, not the best thing to do in this particular climate at all.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next story then.
Now, I like this one, Matt.
Right. Okay.
Because this just says to me that he just cannot make up his mind what bleeding aircraft to buy. This man.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Perhaps he's boxing clever and keeping his options open. Who knows? Anyway, simpleflying.com is the website, and the headline is Ryanair still committed to Chinese-built aircraft amid Airbus Boeing duopoly. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
right.
In 2011, Ryanair placed a memorandum of understanding for a 200-seat Comac C919 variant. In an interview with Simple Flying on Tuesday, the airline CEO Michael O'Leary said that the low-cost carrier is still committed to the Comac program. Currently, the aircraft options are limited when you're talking about an A320 or a 737 sized aircraft. Realistically, the only two options are Airbus or Boeing. However, China is working to introduce the Comac C919 as a third option. Unfortunately, like Berlin's new airport, the entry to service has been delayed somewhat. However, with 5 test aircraft now in the skies, progress is starting to be made. In 2011, when Ryanair signed a memorandum of understanding with Comac regarding a 200-seater C919, however, since then, very little has been said on the topic. Simple Flying got the opportunity to interview the Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary last week at the Airlines for Europe conference in Brussels, and we discussed the Comac. On the topic, O'Leary told us we're still committed to the Comac program. He also identified the need for a challenger to Airbus and Boeing to replace the McDonnell Douglas. He said all airlines and customers need to see the emergence of a third manufacturer to replace McDonnell Douglas, and the Chinese would be a very welcome addition. So the current issues with the C919, however, in his conversation with Simple Flying, he did say that he also identified a couple of issues with the program in its current form. Firstly, identified the delay entry of the aircraft of the market. After all, it was originally due to take its maiden flight back in 2014. However, this didn't take place until 3 years later, with certification still ongoing. On this, O'Leary told us the C919 had been delayed by a number of years. We signed up to a memorandum to work with them to design a stretch version of the 919, which will be a 199/200-seater aircraft. At the moment, there is no sign of it. They have significant challenges getting the C919 certified and into service. An additional hurdle that Ryanair also has, however, is getting the cost of the aircraft down. While aircraft have set list prices, airlines often get a healthy amount sliced off the final cost. This is true for Ryanair with Boeing's 737 family. However, a challenge arises with the Comac C919, with O'Leary commenting that there's not much opportunity to lower the cost of the aircraft there. There's no particular new technology. It's a glorified A320 where 85% of the costs are made up of components, the avionics and all of the rest of it, adding that the labour doesn't form a huge portion of the cost of the aircraft. I'll go through the upside very briefly. He says, however, it's not all doom and gloom with the C919 as far as O'Leary is concerned. In fact, he mentioned that an increased supply of aircraft is the benefit, he told Simple Flying. I think just the very fact that there will be more supply is good. When you look at the state of the industry in the last 12 months, the delay of the MAX, the grounding of the MAX aircraft, the delay in the return to service has put enormous pressure on capacity across the industry, and that has also meant there has been less growth, justifying the last point. He added that Ryanair would actually have no growth in the next 12 months because of the twin impact of MAX delays and the COVID-19 virus. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how do we feel about that? Do we really need a third player, as he's claiming?
It wouldn't hurt. I don't see why. If you're presenting more competition, then you're allowing the industry to work harder to bring the prices down, which helps the airlines enormously. And I've no problem at all. In fact, at the moment, there's only one airline that's really providing a short-haul, reasonable-sized passenger carrier, and that's Airbus. Of course, when the 737 MAX eventually gets on the streets, things will change. But this is an ideal time for a third company to come in. But it's going to be very tough for them because Airbus and Boeing are going to fight tooth and nail for their portions of the market. And they're going to find it very hard to compete against them.
I mean, I do wonder perhaps if said aircraft was available to buy now, given all the trouble that's going on with the MAX at the moment, whether their fortunes could have been somewhat sort of transformed, I guess, if they could, if it was ready to buy now and get in the air, if it had all been certified, perhaps it would be a very different story.
Yeah, possibly, but Airbus seem to have been the one to benefit from that. Yeah, and which has just made them all the stronger.
Yeah. What do you think, Al?
I think one factor that will come into play with this, we've seen the Sukhoi Superjet have a little bit of a checkered life within Western Europe. It's a nice aeroplane and reasonably well liked by the operators, but they have struggled phenomenally with the supply of spare parts and a coherent maintenance manual.
Right.
And I think the same difficulties may well face operators who choose to go down this route. It's all to do with the support. And the aeroplane, okay, it's well behind its scheduled date of introduction to service. We know that, we've discussed that, which kind of leaves me to believe that as and when it comes into service in markets outside of China, that maybe the support infrastructure won't be there. This was the problem that Sukhoi had. And maybe operators are going to be a little bit cautious of going down the same route again, bearing in mind the experience that they had with the Sukhoi. So if you buy into the Boeing or Airbus project, the infrastructure, the engineers dotted around the network, etc., are already in place. So it's a difficult one. I absolutely entirely agree with Nick that it's always good to have competition. A monopoly in any field of commerce is bad. It's just that whether the aeroplane represents a credible alternative, I'm not so sure. And I think the 320 family aircraft has a very long future ahead of it. And okay, you could argue that it's a bit of a sort of premium priced product when you look at, say, Embraer or other manufacturers, but you know what you're getting.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, isn't it? They're trusted brands, they're trusted aircraft. I mean, it's products that people are very familiar with, aren't they?
Well, ultimately, it's a case of you can take your Airbus pretty much anywhere in the world, and you will find an engineer who's licensed to fix it. If you take your Comac or Sukhoi Superjet somewhere, you're going to struggle to find someone to fix it. And that can play heavily on the finances of an airline.
Yeah.
It's all about that infrastructural support.
I can imagine, yeah.
So moving on to...
Before we move on, actually, I believe that there is someone else who has joined us down the line.
Yeah, guys, I think I'm trying to max out your quota for pilots on the show today.
Hey, Armando.
Looking significantly more smarter than I am.
Now, there's Welsh for you.
Yeah, but
more smarter.
But I don't have that
Yeah, there you
halo
go.
over my head, though.
Are you reading that newspaper you're sat on?
Quite, yes. It's. I don't think you can have too many pilots. I'll be honest. I think the world is all the better for many, many pilots.
You're looking very smart there, Armando. You do look the business.
Thanks, Nick. I'm basically you 30 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah, but I wasn't sitting in the captain's chair. I wouldn't dare.
well, there is that. Oh dear. So where are you off to? Anywhere exotic?
Well, as you guys were talking about, I am actually here in Pittsburgh. So you were here three years ago, and here I am sitting at the airport right now on a bit of a delay. So.
Oh, this is very cool.
Well, it's
A delay? Surely not.
Stop it.
Yeah, delays. They never happen in the industry.
No, quite.
Have you broken it already?
No, this airplane is fantastic. It's the fact that my captain, who was coming in from Dallas-Fort Worth, was delayed by about 2 hours for weather. So here I am sitting in the airplane running up and down the aisles. Well, we're we're not going to talk about what I've been doing in the airplane. But
Okay, all right. Again, family show, ladies and gentlemen, family show.
But it's nice to hear you've been showing your face to the customers and explaining to them exactly what's going on. I know a lot of pilots who just hide on the flight deck.
you know, the beauty of working for a small airline is we have a lot more interaction with the customers. We don't have flight attendants on my aircraft, so
you've carried their bags to the airplane for them. That's very noble of you.
we do have gate agents that do that for us, but
okay, all right.
You've got to have a minion at the end of the day.
Right. No, it is nice to. I think it makes a little bit of a difference when one of the pilots comes up and explains to you the situation, why we're delayed, or sometimes it's a weather delay and you're explaining to them from a pilot's point of view, hey, we could go, but the regulations state this, and it's really for our safety, your safety. I think it means a little bit more when one of the pilots comes up, so I still get to do that, which is nice.
Is that something that you're naturally used to through personality, something that the airline has given you training for, or is it something that you're finding your feet with?
A little bit of all of it. I like people. The reason I fly is
that's an amazing thing. Do you remember liking people at any point, Nick? To be fair,
yeah, I love the fact that they spent a lot of money to keep me in a job.
Fair enough.
I love that.
Yeah, maybe after 20 years in the airlines, I'll become slightly misanthropic like Al and Nick, but.
No, I'm forever telling the new generation of first officers that all of those faces, whether they be washed or unwashed, wealthy or poor, they all put the money into our bank account. So they all need to be treated like royalty and given our respect every day.
Well,
I completely agree. Absolutely. And yeah, much like Pip's outfit, they give us a little bit of flexibility, and I get to interact with the passengers. We can still bring passengers and kids up to the flight deck in the middle of the flight and have a chat with them. So it's really nice.
Well, it was great to have you on. Are you able to hang around for a few minutes, or have you got to jump off?
Oh, I hope
I'll
not.
be around for a few minutes, as long as the cell phone service hangs in there. I'll probably turn off the video, but I'll be here for a few.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll move on then. Nice to speak to you, though. Really is. And
moving on,
to
the next story. And this next story, we need to get the handkerchiefs and tissues ready because this may be a story that may be upsetting for Captain Nick.
Well, not really, because I've retired.
Right. So it's retiring about the same time you did then.
Exactly. So this story is all about the airplane that I used to fly has done what I've done. So I've retired from Virgin Atlantic, and so has the A340.
It's still very weird you saying that out loud. I don't know if I'll ever get used to that.
Oh, well, do your best. They say it's earlier than planned, but in fact, I don't think it's much earlier at all. When I was around, the plan was for it to leave at the end of last year, and it was more or less going to coincide with when I would be forced to retire. So it hung on a little bit longer because increased requirement for it to be there. So they extended it a little bit. And they even bought one out of mothballs and put it back into service. And a lot of that was mainly due to the problems that Virgin had with their Dreamliners, particularly the engines of the Dreamliners. But now at last, with the reduction in capacity that has been forced upon the airline because of the current state of affairs with
that thing
that we're not going to talk about. They've decided that now's the time to get rid of the A340, and that's mainly because, of course, it's a bit of a gas guzzler. And if you're going to retire an airplane, and there are only 3 left, this is the fleet to close down. So it's retired its last remaining 340 on Monday. The last 3 previously planned for the end of May. Originally, the aircraft type was going to be retired in 2019, but they extended the schedule several times. Final commercial flight was classic. And I'm so glad I wasn't on it.
That's your favourite trip, this one, isn't it, Nick?
Yes, it was the VS 412 from Lagos, Nigeria to London Heathrow. And it was operated by GV Fit, which sweet A340 worked very nicely. I flew that many times. In fact, I flew them all many times, so I knew them all by heart. The airline first received the A340-300 when I joined the airline in '93. So I was literally recruited onto the Airbus, and of course I retired more or less with it as well. So the Airbus's, the 340's career with Virgin more or less matched mine. The older aircraft in Virgin's fleet are being replaced through fleet modernisation, with an order for 14 of the A330-900 Neo, which is going to be a fantastic aeroplane. Obviously a twin. They've got 4 in service at the moment, and the former will be replaced by a Virgin's 14 A330 CEO aircraft. That's 4 200s, 10 300s. The remaining 7 Boeing 747-400s will be phased out in 2021 as more of the fantastic A350-1000 deliveries get fulfilled. So it looks like the Airbuses are going to knock the 400s out of the airline. Virgin also, of course, operates some other Boeings, specifically the rather troubled 787-9 Dreamliner. And the A340-600 in their silver signature and red livery were famous and welcomed sights at London Heathrow Airport. It says, I love this author, he's great. So the hub dominantly served by British Airways and its long-haul fleet, mostly 747-400s, 777s, 787s. Virgin was amongst the very few A340 operators at Heathrow, and it was indeed a much-loved airplane. Although the air traffickers didn't like the Dash 300 very much, very slow rate of climb, the Dash 600 was a superb aircraft and was a delight to fly.
Wasn't it you who said
the Dash 300 had
hair dryers?
4 CFM 56s, didn't it?
It had, yes, and the C2 variant was the low-powered one, and we got rid of those pretty quickly and got the C4s, which were much better, and we could hit all the height constraints anyone wanted. But people forget about that. They always go back to those original C2 engine ones, which were a little bit short of guts.
So, I mean, you were saying that there's the A340, there were several variants, the Dash, 300 and so on and so forth. If you were type rated, forgive my naivety here, if you're type rated on the 340, does that mean you can fly the variants as well, or do you have to do a type rating for each variant?
No, you could fly each variant and the twin engine 330 and the twin engine 350. That you could have them all on the same type rating on your license at the same time. In fact, when I started flying the 330, I think the company didn't have to give me a course, but I think I did a 2-day course. And in theory, you could climb from the 340 straight into the 350, although the cockpit's remarkably different. And you would be legal to fly it, although I think it would be sensible to do a course.
A refresher, shall we say.
Yeah, just to look-see, because it works a slightly different way with all the inputs.
To put that into context for you, Matt, currently I'm A319, 318, 320, 321, 330 and 350.
Okay.
So
350?
The 320 family, because it's the same type rating as the 330.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
So you can go from flying something the size of a shoe to something the size of an ocean liner. That's very good.
Indeed, and obviously at Monarch we used to do that because I used to fly the 320, the 321 and the 330. And whilst you would view the 330 as the smaller version of the 340, obviously, for me it was the bigger brother, if you like. And going from the 320 to the 330 in a matter of days did, require a little bit of concentration. And similarly, going back to the 320 from the 330. But as far as the regulator's concerned, the 320 family is everything from the the 318 up to the 321, and the 330 and the 350 are a common type rating. So as an Airbus guy, you can be 320 family with a cross crew qualification onto the 330/350, no problem. The only thing they wouldn't allow is for you to be a combination of 320, 330 and 340.
Oh, right. Okay. Any idea why?
I think it's just one step too far.
Right.
You lose count of the engines.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Now that's entirely up to the carrier, right, guys? Because I was just talking to the captain that I was flying with yesterday, who was an American A330 pilot, and he said, I asked him. Actually, I brought Nick up, and I said, "Hey, are you cross qualified on the 330 and the 340?" And he said, "We didn't do that. Lufthansa tried what Al was talking about, going from 320 all the way up to 340, and then they backed down from it and said, well, that is a step too far, but it is entirely up to the carrier how they use you, right?
It's up to the carrier how they use you. It's also the regulator. For us, the regulator, I mean, we weren't operating the 340, but the regulator looked at the fact that we had CFM 56s on the 320, IE engines on the 321, and Rolls-Royce engines on the 330. So they said, look, you've got numerous different aircraft here with numerous engines. There has to be a limit to the permutations that you want. So when the 350 came into the equation, I think the regulator said, okay, we don't mind you being 330/350 and 320 family, but we're not very keen to have 320 family, 330 family, and the 340 family.
Right. So, and again, this is a naive question, I'm sure, on my part. You mentioned, obviously, there's different types of engines. You've got the Rolls-Royce engine, which is one you mentioned. Does it make a huge difference what what powerhouse essentially is attached?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say no.
Okay.
I'll say maybe.
But I mean, presumably they have the potential to handle very differently, if you see what I mean, because it's got, I don't know. I mean, do they all have the same amount? I'm going to sound like such a moron. Do they all have the same amount of thrust or whatever it is that you're?
No, they don't. No, because obviously a different weight of aircraft, you're going to need more powerful engines.
Yeah.
I think so long as the engines are usually instrumentated the same way or a similar way, that's fine.
Sort of tuned to the same sort of.
Yeah, because quite honestly, the aircraft looks after all the limits on the engines, the temperature limits and the speed limits, and the only, in fact, I can't think of a particularly difficult reason around. It's not like you need to know your engine intimately to be able to run it.
Right.
Al, so why would you say yes?
Probably because of my sort of heritage. So the CFMs, the instrumentation is N1. The IE, the instrumentation is EPA.
But
and
EPA will degrade to N1 with a failure, so you need to know how to use N1 on both types.
Absolutely. I think where really I came to my conclusion of yes, it does make a difference is with regards to the handling of the aircraft with regards to thrust. So, for example, if you fly a CFM A320 and an IAE 320, so you've got the same airframe, just different engines. The fan size of the CFM is much bigger than the fan size of the IAE. So when it comes to landing the aeroplane and flaring, if you were to just slam shut the thrust levers on the IE engine, it really wouldn't make much difference because it's a relatively small fan. If you were to do it on the CFM 56, because the fan's much bigger, the aeroplane will fundamentally just fall out of the sky. So the handling of how you operate it for the landing phase is different. And also, with regards to the thrust available in the cruise. So I know you said that when you flew the early engine-equipped 340-3, it really was puffing, just trying to get airborne. So, trying to achieve those climb gradients on departures and so forth was quite a struggle. Whereas when you got the later engined aircraft, it was much easier. So fundamentally, day to day, does it make a lot of difference? No, not really. But in the subtle aspects of handling the aircraft, yes, it does. That's my opinion anyway.
You're capable of subtle handling. I'm afraid I wasn't.
I mean, we always used to complain vociferously about the very sloppy auto thrust on the Rolls-Royce engine 330s. So when you flew the 330 and the various 340s, did you find any particular difference in how the auto thrust responded on the various engine types, or was it fairly similar?
No, very similar.
You see, the auto thrust on the 320 and 321 is much more precise than it is on the 330.
It's just getting a bit technical for our audience.
Not at all.
We need some rickets.
I was essentially lost the minute that the minute we started the show, to be fair, so I don't think it got anything to do with that, but no.
To bring it back to you, Matt, I mean, with regards to the coaches that you drive,
yeah.
You can have the same body, but with different engines. Yeah?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
and does it make a difference to how you handle the coach with regards to your planning for inclines and slowing down?
Well, I mean, if it's a bigger engine, you don't have to plan quite so much usually because you've got the grunt to sort of to pull it up the hill with very little issue. But yeah, no, I see what you mean. That was more. I was just intrigued because I know from when we've had sort of conversations in the pub or whatever where it was saying essentially, like Nick was saying, a lot of the time, things are sort of, the engine management systems, if you like, make them all behave according to what settings you've got on the controller, so that it's a much more regulated sort of powerhouse as opposed to perhaps something you've got in an like a coach or a car or whatever, where
absolutely. But what I'm effectively getting to is that when you drive the coach, that the coach will fundamentally look after you, but with experience, you can help very much in how you drive it and how you approach inclines and so forth to make it a lot easier on you and the coach, can't you?
Yeah, no, that's true. I will just say Armando unfortunately has dropped off the call because of a technical glitch at his end. He's in the chat room and he was just saying, out of interest, in the chat room, he's saying, what about the emergency procedures with the different engines? Are there differences depending on the lumps that you're pulling around?
Broadly, they're similar. There are different ECAMs, so different annotations of issues with an engine depending on what aircraft, your engine type you're flying, rather.
Yeah, some of the bigger Rolls-Royces had sort of shaft torque protection that the smaller engines didn't. But quite honestly, when an emergency comes up, you don't have an intimate knowledge of every single drill.
No.
It's the whole point of having an electronic ECAM that leads you through the actions. So it was never really a problem. If you got one of these faults, you just needed to know about it, know vaguely what was going to happen, and plan ahead accordingly.
Yeah, we're getting the warning from the chat room, look, that we need to sort of move on. Adam Spinks just said, are they still talking about pilot stuff? I think it's probably time to move on.
So, moving on to the next story.
Moving
on to the next story, and this is all about aircraft fighting each other. So I think Armando's got this one next, hasn't he?
He has, yes. You're going to make me press another button now, aren't you? Yeah, here we go. Yes, Armando, take it away.
Hey guys, in another ground mishap incident, a Thai Airways Airbus A330 has seriously damaged a Gulfstream 4 private jet. So it occurred while taxiing at Vientiane Airport on the 9th of March after its wings struck the tail of the Gulfstream, chopping it clean off. So the aircraft, an Airbus A330-300, was about to perform flight TG575 from Vientiane to Bangkok, had 92 passengers and crew on board when the incident occurred. Now, there's photos on Twitter showing Gulfstream 4, operated by Blue Sky Leasing, in its parking bay, looking in perfectly pristine condition, other than the fact that its tail is hanging somewhat perfectly off the side. On closer inspection, you can see that the landing gear also has been damaged. It's pretty twisted in its stance rather than being in line with the pavement markings. So for the Airbus A330, the damage is entirely limited to the outboard leading edge of the wing. The photos show a dent just prior to the wingtip. Now, obviously, for the Airbus, the repairs should be fairly easy. However, it's pretty different for the Gulfstream. It's going to have to go a pretty significant inspection, and it's likely going to be written off completely because of that damage.
I mean, it's just so sad when they say essentially that it's going to get written off, doesn't it? Yeah.
I know.
It does look fairly damaged.
Seriously. Yes. I mean, it's going to need
it's wrecked.
And they do say essentially that if you can't fix it with gaffer, then you should just essentially throw it away.
I think there's a good chance you could get some gaffer tape around that and make it look a lot better.
Forklift it back up and kind of glue it. No, you're always going on, Matt, about how good that Gorilla Glue is.
It is, yes. I mean, that would be the ultimate test for it, certainly.
I love the way they make it sound like the wing chopped it off. Which, of course, it couldn't possibly do because the wing's too high for that. What it did was it hit the tail and it just levered it downwards and the fuselage failed. So it's not like it came along like an axe and went slicing through it.
I mean, it's made quite a mess of it, though. It's of the other plane as well, isn't it?
That's a bit of a dink, yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't think it'll buff out. I think that's...
No, I'd be a bit careful pulling your slats in.
But, right. Yeah, they may be a little less responsive than you'd hoped.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the pilots on that Gulfstream looking at the MEL list and just saying...
Yeah, you're thinking...
we haven't got a tail. No,
I'm looking at the registration of that Gulf. Does it actually say TWAT?
Okay.
That's what it looks like. MTWAT.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, tell me I'm wrong. Come on.
I have nothing to say.
I must be right then.
You're getting yourself into a sticky mess now, Nick.
Lovely. Good. Okay, whose go is it next? I've no idea.
It's moi.
Oh, is it? Oh, all right. Then we'll leave you to take charge.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So next story. This one is on the CNBC.com website. Headline: Boeing 737 MAX cancellations pile up in break start to the year. So Boeing reported Wednesday this week that it logged more commercial aircraft cancellations than new orders in February, marking a bleak start to the year for the manufacturer, already reeling from the crashes of its best-selling plane. Boeing said Air Canada cancelled 11 MAX aircraft, while some other customers converted their orders for larger aircraft. For example, aircraft leasing firm Air Lease converted 9 MAX planes into 3 787s. Oman Air converted 10 MAXs into 4 787s. The cancellations tipped Boeing's monthly orders into negative territory, the company said. The Chicago-based manufacturer logged 18 gross orders last month, its first orders for the year, but it also posted 46 cancellations, bringing its total net sales activity for the year to 28 cancellations. A year ago, governments around the world grounded the 737 MAX, obviously after the 2 crashes, and orders were halted after the second crash back in March 2019. And Boeing suspended production of the MAX jets in January. The company is sticking with its estimate that expects regulators to lift the ban on the aircraft mid-year. Boeing is now facing a fresh challenge with the spread of the C virus, which is rolling the airline industry, or roiling them, I should say. Bookings are creating the airline and chiefs catering, I should say. Blimey, what's in that water? And airline chiefs this week warned it could worsen before it improves as travellers opt to stay at home and large companies call off business trips. The company is now drawing down more than a $13 billion loan it secured in January after then expecting to shore up funds amid coronavirus. God, I'm struggling with that one
Well done,
today.
you said it out loud. Well done.
I know. Boeing shares, for anyone who's got Boeing shares, were down 14% to $199 a share.
That's the time to buy.
At the lowest
Absolutely,
price
yeah.
since 2017. The drop was shaving more than 200 points off the Dow Jones index. Bloody blah.
In fact, I seem to remember actually reading in the BFF chat, wasn't it? I think somebody was saying now is definitely the right time to be buying aircraft.
Aircraft,
not buying aircraft, buying shares in frame manufacturers and airlines. Because yes, whilst things are not great at the moment, let's be honest, it's not going to stay like this forever, is it?
No.
We'll be back to normal sooner than we.
Well,
we
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope so.
Indeed.
No, it's interesting that those airlines that now are suffering because they've got too many aircraft and they would be grounding them because they haven't got enough passengers to use them are probably very grateful if they've got 737 Maxes sitting there in Seattle because they're not having to pay for them.
Well, no, and also they're not paying for the parking of them while this is all going. That's all being paid for by Boeing at the moment.
So there's an unexpected upside to the grounding. But the other thing I was going to mention was that this has now really given Airbus a chance to leap ahead, and the total orders for the Airbus 320 family against the Boeing 737 family, Airbus have now overtaken Boeing, despite the fact that they started building their aircraft in the mid-80s, and Boeing had more or less a 20-year lead on 737 sales, and Airbus have outsold Boeing pretty regularly since the turn of this century.
Yeah.
From the chat room, Nick, Jonathan Warner says, "Are you wearing that hat for a bet?"
No. If I was wearing a Boeing one, it would be.
Perhaps.
There you go. Look, I popped it up there. It's a nice hat, Nick. Are you wearing that for a bet? I mean, that's a bit rude, isn't it?
No, it's a bit rude, I think. So I thought he was
It's
a nice
fine
chap.
hat. I have a very similar model that I was
I'm
gifted
wearing the-
by the excellent PR team at Airbus.
I'm wearing the T-shirt for a bet. But,
Hey, now look, there's no need for that. Actually, the main man, Micah, I'll just pop it up on the screen for you. He's saying actually you can say this will all come back. There's a good chance that it won't. This disease is going to change the social norms for years to come. Air travel may decline permanently. How do we feel about that? Do we think that's likely?
I think that's a little pessimistic. SARS was, certainly for some areas of the world, equally dramatic. They shrugged it off pretty damn quickly.
Jonathan Warner's been back on, by the way. Same brand as the Carlos van, he sort of said.
Yeah,
the Airbus
very funny.
van.
Yeah, we got Captain Al to thank for that one.
Well, quite,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So moving on to Captain Al, who's going
You
to
still
read the
not
next
paid
story.
me for that. I mean,
Yeah.
that
All
increased
right,
the
Al.
value of that vehicle by a huge amount.
Yeah. So the next story, Al, is with
Bit
you.
worrying, this one.
This must be sort of resonating. I don't know. Would it be resonating bad memories here, perhaps?
Yes, it certainly does. This story comes from The Guardian, UK newspaper. The headline being, Norwegian air shuttle crew was shut out of hotel over cash fears. Crew members from the loss-making low-cost airline Norwegian air shuttle were refused access to their rooms at an airport hotel until advanced payment was received from the company. Copthorne Hotel at London Gatwick delayed staff accessing rooms on Monday, The Guardian has learned. In a letter to airline employees seen by The Guardian, and indeed me, the hotel said, "We have requested your company, Norwegian Airlines, to supply us with advance payment for your accommodation." The letter, written by the front of house manager, is dated the 9th of March. The Guardian understands that the hotel is no longer demanding that room bills are settled in advance. The carrier has had a turbulent few months with attempts at an overhaul of its finances hit by the outbreak of coronavirus and a 22% fall in passenger numbers in February. Airlines have been hard hit by travel restrictions due to the spread of the virus, with many implementing emergency cost-cutting measures and slashing flights. The owners of Flybe said the coronavirus outbreak was the final blow that pushed Europe's largest regional airline into administration this month. Norwegian, the third... I love the way that newspapers do that. They introduce a failed carrier into the story about a operating carrier, just to give it a little bit more sort of drama and crisis. Anyway, Norwegian, the third largest low-cost carrier in Europe, behind EasyJet and Ryanair, has cancelled 3,000 flights between mid-March and mid-June and has temporarily laid off staff. It posted an operating loss of £340 million in its 2018 financial results and launched an emergency cash call at the end of January, aiming to raise 3 billion kroner, which is £240 million, from its shareholders after IAG, which owns British Airways, ruled out a takeover. Norwegian shares have slumped by 74% since the start of the coronavirus in China and were 15% lower on Wednesday afternoon, the lowest level since 2005. The airline said, "We do not discuss commercially sensitive information regarding our suppliers. This is a standalone case which has now been resolved." Yes, I'm very much aware that everybody associated with aviation, the fuel companies, the handling companies, the hotels that crew stay in, are very, very twitchy. And it doesn't take much more than a little bit of a rumor for things to get very quickly out of hand.
Yeah.
And yes, there are a lot of airlines that are going to struggle through this period of time. I actually saw the letter in question, and to be fair, it was nicely written and worded, and the bit that The Guardian hasn't reported is that the hotel said in their letter, "Please do take a seat, make you comfortable whilst we resolve this with your airline, and we will provide you refreshments," which I thought was quite nice, rather than just the security guard at the door saying, "You're not welcome. You know, the stable's around the corner if you want it, but you can't come in here." So I thought it was nicely handled by the hotel, and I think it's probably a bit unfortunate that it's come into the public domain, because I don't imagine that the front of house manager was very keen to do this, but you know, financial necessity is what it is.
Got to make the
Unfortunately, the news doesn't get too much better for Norwegian, because they very recently, as in today, have basically had to go for a government bailout. The airline CEO, Jacob Schwam, did not discuss the amount that was being sought from the government of Norway, but he has said that the airline requires help within weeks, not months.
Right.
And of course, with the United States closing entry to a lot of countries to the United States, that's affecting Norwegian. We've already talked about the fact that they've been badly hit by the MAX problem, and obviously the 787 issue with the engines has not helped them. So I wish them well, and I have friends at Norwegian, so I hope everything works out, as I do for all of the airlines that are struggling at the moment. We really don't want to see an aviation apocalypse.
No. This is it's a difficult one to sort of comment on, isn't it? Really, because it's
they did buy a lot of new aircraft, Norwegian, didn't they? They have, well, whether they brought them or whether they're leasing them or what. I know they, in the last few years, have taken on quite a lot of new aircraft, which obviously all cost money.
Relatively speaking, that's not difficult to do. What's difficult is filling the aircraft with people paying enough money to pay the leasing or mortgage costs. I mean, the majority of airlines do tend to lease because there are tax breaks for leasing.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the lease payments on the 787s are quite considerable. And those lease payments are typically negotiated with the lease companies quite early on. So it's not really something that you can go back and go, its times are a bit hard. Can we come to some sort of deal? You take out a lease. It's only in extremis will the leaseholders or the lessors come to an agreement. They can do, they have done. But these are, the terms that you take on board the aircraft. And there are plenty of people who will sell you or lease you aircraft. It's your problem to pay the bills. Because they can easily get their aircraft back.
Yes. I suppose that's the big advantage about leasing, isn't it? From their point of view, it's not like you're taking out finance on an aircraft and that. Although I suppose you can reclaim the aircraft if that happens. I guess it's yeah, it's not good news anyway. There's fingers crossed that
Everything's good,
something sorts out, because I know several people who have flown with Norwegian who have had nothing but nice things to say about their experience. In fact, Phil Nangle, the picture that's behind us actually was sent by Phil Nangle. It was on a flight that he took this week with Norwegian, and he had nothing but nice things to say about his experience. So fingers crossed it's not another one that's about to go under, which will be a shame. We're going to have to
Nick,
move on, I'm afraid.
You are up next, Nick, with with some fighting, with a bit of fighting talk on this next story.
A bit of fighting talk. Well, just give me a clue here. Carlos.
Story 7.
Yep. There's your clue.
Story 7. Oh,
the one after 6 and before 8.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, I love After 8.
If only I was an Airbus pilot, I'd be able to work that out.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
I do love it when people on the radio, when ATC say what level you're requesting, and they say, I'm looking for flight level 370. And I always do it. I say, you'll find it between 360 and 380. I must bore my FOs to death by now.
Yeah, and the rest of the aviation community. So this is a story on the Manchester Evening News. Hardly surprising, since it affected Manchester Airport. And a poor EasyJet, forced to turn back twice, it says, after disturbances on board. So 6 men have been arrested on a flight from Manchester to Alicante. Was forced to turn back twice.
The Benidorm Express, as it's known up here.
Excellent. Flight 1919. I don't know if that's a clue. It was March the 5th. It was delayed by over 3 hours. The Manchester Post have confirmed that 6 passengers were arrested for a number of offences. 2 men on suspicion of being drunk and disorderly before boarding the flight. They received a fine. Another 4 men were arrested on suspicion of failing to comply with cabin crew directions. Yabbo. And have been summoned to attend court on a later date. So the plane was forced to return to its stand after one group of passengers caused a disturbance on board. The officers from the police met the aircraft and removed all the disruptive passengers. Holidaymakers were further delayed when a medical incident meant the plane had to return to stand as it was taxiing for takeoff. So that first one, had it actually gone airborne?
I think it was only taxiing, wasn't it?
Well, the plane was forced to return to its stand. That seems to me that it was taxiing, and then it returned again for a medical problem. So I don't think it actually got airborne. This is a bit of a non-story now.
Yeah.
So the police...
Don't say that.
The police... Who picked this stupid story? The police said at around 3:30, police were called to report of a disturbance at Gate 8 in Terminal 1. Blah, blah, we've had that bit. Separate incident, had that bit. All 4 people received a summons to court. In a third unrelated incident, while the aircraft was taxiing off, it was forced to return due to a medical accident. So basically, they taxied out, came back, offloaded some drunks, taxied out, came back, offloaded a poor unwell passenger. End of
and
story.
then flew somewhere.
And then, flew somewhere, presumably to Alicante.
Well, yes. So there is that. Actually, there's some great concern in the chat room about the syndrome, I should stress. So Ra Con has basically sort of messaged saying that Nick Anderson in PT UK, beware APG is spreading, play it safe. And Dr. Steph couldn't really help herself, really. She said, Ra Con, I was going to say something about the highly contagious nature of APG syndrome, but given the current climate, perhaps I'd better not.
Well, I do my best to spread the syndrome wherever I go.
Oh, that's
spreading the love.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is why everybody should wear condoms.
Right. Okay.
Anyway.
Particularly the Welsh.
Right. I don't know what to do with that information.
Now, this next story.
Yes, please save us.
Oh, my word. I really hope you're not going to put the pictures up on the screen.
Oh, can't wait.
Al will love this. This next story is very interesting indeed. This is on the CanberraTimes.com.
Oh, he has given me the pictures.
Oh, boy.
Our producer has given us the
For
pictures.
those of you watching in the world of YouTube,
Right, I'll just use the one picture, I think, because that's all we
No,
need.
no.
Yeah.
You've got to show them all. It's compulsory.
Is it?
Yeah.
So
Right.
Sky
Okay.
Whale returns to Canberra after 7-year absence.
Right.
So it's been 7 years between sightings, but for Canberrans
I don't know
anxious
if I
to
can
see
push
its
this
return, the wait was
I'll
worth
push
it.
it for you. Which one is it?
Sky Whale, the symbol of Canberra.
Here we go. Prepare for the chat room to go
centenary.
into slight
Oh,
meltdown.
blimey.
There we go.
There we go. Returned to the capital
Oh, boy.
on Monday for Canberra Day.
I just seen Al's eyes just perk up slightly.
With celebrations,
I'm spoiled for choice.
Yes,
spectators able save it Alan. Spectators able to make brand new memories of the famous hot air balloon, while the
I feel scarred
parted
by this image.
whale did not take flight. The Sky Whale was inflated in all
enough,
her
make me
glory
go.
on the lawns of Old Parliament House
Please
to the
don't say stuff like that.
to the delight of thousands of people. Being such an unconventional shape, getting Sky Whale to rise
You're not
proved
kidding.
to be more difficult than first thought. One side of the whale seemed to inflate more quickly than the other, which needed several attempts to be filled with hot air before it ascended.
Quite, yeah.
We needed Al there. Sky Whale's pilot, Craig
I was on
Farrell,
standby, but you know.
said the inflation was only half the challenge. The other half is to get it down, and we're here to entertain the crowd, Mr. Farrell said.
I've
It's
got a
not
headache.
just the size of the Sky Whale.
No, never
That's
is.
the challenging. It's the asymmetry. Everything else in the balloon that isn't a traditional teardrop shape is dead weight. Once you introduce this asymmetry into the mix, it's very difficult aerodynamically to hold it up, and landing is even more difficult. Sky Whale burners were
Are you
given
using
a
these words
workout
on purpose?
throughout the morning, making sure the balloon stayed inflated to entertain the crowds. The balloon remained tethered throughout the morning, particularly due to the large amount of space required, I'm not surprised, to land the Sky Whale should it take off. We couldn't land in a confined space, he said. We needed a football or oval to land it on carefully, and they needed
Very
other options.
carefully.
The Sky
Yeah.
Whale was joined by the 38-metre-high T-Rex, and that was quite a good-sized balloon. Next to it, the lawns of the Old Parliament House began to look like the start of a Japanese monster movie, with two large inflatable creatures standing side
Sorry,
by
I'm reading the
side.
chat room.
Brilliant.
Sky Whale was commissioned. Oh, I can't believe this next bit. Sky Whale was commissioned for Canberra's centenary celebrations in 2013 at a cost of more than $300,000.
Oh, good lord.
Designed by artist Patricia Pensinini, the
Right.
hot air balloon received controversial, I'm not surprised, and mixed reactions upon its unveiling, but has since become a Canberra icon. I just...
Right. Okay, I mean,
There is no
should we just
words.
go straight to the chat room?
That's
there we
more
go.
than you'd pay at Spearmint Rhino.
Right, yes. Dr. Steffer said what the actual thing. Jonathan Warner, who's very rarely lost for words, is actually lost for words.
This explains to me why so many of those Australians we have as listeners like flying hot air balloons.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, they
yes.
obviously get a big thrill out of it.
Yeah. Tanya is also lost for words. What the your legendary producer, the legend that is Auntie Liz. It's what the and I think my favourite one of her comments is I can't unsee that, which is great. The air stick is being far too sensible and actually telling us who the designer is. Isabella Pacchini, she is the designer. I mean, just... I mean, Jonathan Warner ends with saying this is the best story you've ever had on the show.
Thanks for that, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't know why he's
any
laughing.
military story.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know why he's laughing, because at this rate there won't be time for military, but anyway.
Well, I think it is a military
Painted grey
story.
and he'll-
If I saw that coming over the horizon, I'd run.
Richard Adams, again, he's got a fantastic idea, Carlos. Time for a caption competition, I think.
Oh, no.
Have you seen the little dog that someone dressed up to imitate it?
Oh, no.
Oh,
There's
that is
actually,
so
someone has actually dressed up their dog
Right,
to imitate
gosh.
the whale. Honestly.
Oh dear. Anyway,
who chose that story? Honestly, I definitely did not put that one in the box this week.
I'm afraid that would be John, our producer.
It's a good job.
Yeah.
It's a good job. It's a tethered balloon because I mean, any hot air balloon pilot who'd actually have to take that in the air would feel quite a tit, wouldn't they?
Indeed, yes. That was sent to us by the Air Stig, actually.
Thanks, Air Stig.
Yeah, thanks for
Name
that.
check,
That was
Air
just
Stig.
like. Anyway, we better move on before we get shut down.
Al,
Yeah.
the next story, Al, is getting back to all seriousness again. The next story is for you, Al.
Yeah, I seem to have been deliberately targeted with the sad stories, don't I? But this one comes from the BBC, and it says, Flybe plane seized by Isle of Man government due to outstanding debts. An aircraft owned by collapsed airline Flybe has been impounded by the Manx government until the company's outstanding debts are paid, the Isle of Man's Treasury Minister has said. Alfred Cannon said the airline owed the infrastructure department more than £300,000 in landing fees, as well as air passenger duty from February. Although that figure is not known yet, January's payment was £155,500. Flybe's administrator EY, better known as Ernst Young, said the matter would be reviewed. Mr. Cannon told the Manx Parliament a Bombardier Dash 8 aircraft, which was the aircraft in question, has a replacement value of around about £25 million and a book value of £4 million. So I hope that we should indeed get our money that is owed. The island's Customs and Excise Division was waiting for confirmation of the total amount of APD still due to the government, Mr. Cannon said. The last Flybe aircraft to land at Ronaldsway Airport touched down on the evening of 4th of March, hours before the airline went bust. A spokesman for EY said the team continued to work through the process of collecting information and planning the realization of assets while supporting employees. This particular situation will be reviewed and considered in due course. So indeed, the government have impounded it. They'll be hoping to hold it ransom for their money.
But, I mean, forgive my naivety here, but I mean, presumably this is a very common thing, though, surely, when something like this happens. I mean...
Yes, typically what happens, and it's happened to the Thomas Cook aircraft at Manchester, is the airport will put a snow plough or something like that, preventing the aircraft to be moved. There will be stickers on the door, maybe chains around the undercarriage, basically placing a claim on the aircraft for unpaid fees. Now, those of us who've travelled around various airports of the world will see that there are aircraft that have been parked up there for years, decades, because the airport have not been able to recover the money. I doubt that will be the case for this Dash 8, but there is, I'm just trying to think, I think it's an MD-88 in Bucharest. I think it's a 727 in Faro. They've been, well, certainly the aircraft at Faro's been there since the 90s.
Oh, gosh.
And, you know, the airport have tried to get, you know, money from the owners of it. But, yeah, fundamentally it's parked there. The airport can't do very much about it because they don't own it. They've just had to build cones and barriers around it. So, yeah, ultimately, the airport will end up negotiating with the owner of the aircraft, because I think Flybe were the leasers of the aircraft, so it's the lessors of the aircraft. And ultimately it will be flown out of there. But, yeah, they'll try to hold on to it for some form of collateral. Whether they get paid or not, I don't know.
It's kind of unfair to a certain extent, because there'll be a lot of companies who will be in debt to the broken Flybe airline. And it's only those who can grab hold of some assets and hold them to ransom that stand a chance of getting all their money back. Everyone else is going to have to wait until all the assets are put in a pool, and then that's going to be spread out amongst them. I don't blame Isle of Man for doing this, but it kind of gives them an advantage over lots of other companies who will be equally disadvantaged by the death of Flybe.
Yeah.
It also becomes quite complicated because I mentioned Thomas Cook. I mean, it's been several months since their sad demise, and some of their aircraft still sit on the ground at Manchester. because the paperwork associated with these aircraft is phenomenal. Because people might just think, okay, it's an aircraft, that's pretty straightforward. But the airframe will be owned by one company. The engines will probably be owned by another company. And almost certainly the APU will be owned by a third company.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
so the negotiations aren't just between two parties; they can be with several parties.
Well, of course, and as you're saying, the thing is like we were saying earlier, a lot of these aircraft aren't actually owned by Flybe; they're actually owned by someone else. So,
yep.
They're holding someone else's stock, if you like, to ransom.
Yep.
And then other things that come into play, as is the case with Thomas Cook and was the case at Monarch. The maintenance organisations won't release the records for maintenance for these aircraft until they've been paid. So an aircraft is useless without its documents.
Interesting.
So that's true, yeah.
Now, you must have seen that program where people go around the world and they grab...
Airplane repo.
There you go.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
I wonder
what?
if... they repossess
Awesome
aircraft that are left on the ground. And fly them away, and very interesting program. And I'm just wondering if there's a case for someone sneaking up in the dead of night and moving the chocks and getting this Flybe airplane out.
Getting it out of the Isle of Man.
Yeah, exactly.
This is why typically they put things like airport snowplows in the way to make it almost impossible to do that.
Yep.
I've certainly seen
I know a few 16-year-olds who could move that for you.
Right. Yeah. With a slightly positive news, I suppose, if we could try and spin it slightly, because obviously one of the big things about Flybe going under was the loss of regional routes, if you like, for us. So Logan Air, as I think we've mentioned before, they picked up some of the routes out of Newquay. Now there's an airline here I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce. It's spelled
Aurigny.
Aurigny. Thank you, Al. Legendary. So Aurigny is to operate flights out of Guernsey. That's good news, because that was quite a big. I think Mum actually flew Flybe into Guernsey many years ago. Blue Islands has today announced it will operate multiple daily flights between Exeter and Manchester. Blue Islands will establish a base including engineering support in Exeter for its ATR aircraft and crew to serve the route, which will operate multiple flights throughout the day from mid-April. And British Airways are going to be connecting Newquay to Heathrow. Thanks to Alan Loveday, who is it only brief, or is it just seasonal then? Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you to Alan Loveday for sending that email in to us. We probably ought to move on then. Nick,
Nick,
you have the next one.
Yeah, it's an interesting story for an all-female crew who took a flight, and it was both controlled and manned entirely. That's a bad choice of words. Manned by an all-female crew. It was femaled by an all-female crew. So no one could accuse Canada's best-known airline. Oh, by the way, this is from narcity.com. Best-known airline of not taking International Women's Day seriously this year. History was made with an all-female Air Canada crew and air traffic control team. The flight took off from Toronto, landed in Edmonton, meaning the capital of Alberta has a place in aviation history. So it was pretty good. I mean, it must have taken some organisation to get every single air traffic controller that they spoke to on shift at the right time, all ladies. And then I suppose getting the crew involved was possibly a little bit easier. But the President and Chief Executive of Air Canada says women have shattered the glass ceiling throughout the business, and they proudly salute and celebrate the achievements and contributions of nearly 16,000 women who work at Air Canada around the world today. So, a good story for the ladies on what's it called?
I still find
International
it
Women's Day.
Unbelievable that in this day and age it still has to be a thing. it really bothers me that because I genuinely don't care as long as the person, it could be a monkey for all I care, as long as they're qualified. Whoever has got the stop it. But do you know what I mean? It's like I don't understand why it should be why there is so much.
Well, I think in the industry there is still a reluctance in some countries and in some airlines to recruit every available and every qualified woman, because they do still have some prejudice. So, and I think that seriously there are not enough women in the industry.
Agreed.
So when you can get a flight that manages to achieve this, it is something of a milestone, and particularly since it was
it's good
International
PR
Women's
if
Day.
nothing else. But it's like, it is the issue that the industry is not attractive to women to become a part of. Is that what it is, or do you think it's one of those where essentially boys are usually interested in aircraft? And
that's a question that's beyond me. I don't know. I'm interested in airplanes, and I know lots of ladies that are interested in airplanes, but perhaps not enough. I think the day we'll stop getting these stories is the day when parity has been reached.
Yeah, no, agreed. No, that's a fair point. Okay, we're going to move on to the next story. That is
Armando.
From Armando. If he can just find the right button. I've broken it.
Armando has a button?
He long story. We'll cover that another time. Anyway, take it away, Armando.
Hey guys, I did want to do one story. The FAA is taking some steps to reduce the number of ghost flights in the air. This federal agency announced that it would temporarily be waiving minimum slot use requirements at U.S. airports. This is going to allow airlines to cancel flights without fear of losing their slots at congested or busy airports. Airlines have obviously seen this downturn in business amongst this ongoing coronavirus outbreak. So in a recent press release, the FAA stated that they would waive the requirement through May 31st of this year, and that the change would apply to both domestic and foreign airlines. It also announced that the agency will continue to monitor the coronavirus impact on travel and, quote, may adjust this waiver as circumstances warrant, end quote. So the New York Post recently reported on how the minimum slot use regulation, also known as the 80-20 rule, was causing airlines to fly empty planes, or what's called ghost flights, in order to maintain their slots. Obviously, flying these empty planes can be costly. Airlines have to burn an average of 5 gallons of jet fuel per mile. These flights also emit an average of half a ton of carbon dioxide per seat, according to the New York Post. So the European Union has also suspended their rules requiring the airlines to fly 80% of their flights to keep their slots, and that's according to a Reuters report. They said that the Commission will put forward very rapidly some legislation. They said that they want to make it easier for airlines to keep their airport slots, even if they do not operate flights in those slots because of the declining traffic.
Don't know what happened there. Sorry about
Sorry,
that. So
bro.
we just got the end got cut off there. So it's
Ghost
He was
flights.
talking about maintaining your slot, which is something I've always been in favour of.
Of course, absolutely. I expect nothing less, Al. So anyway,
Yeah,
it's
you know what
exactly
they
the
say?
same is happening in Europe. I think it's worth saying the EU has now suspended its rules regarding slot usage for 4 months. I must admit, I didn't realise that ghost flights was a thing, because I think was I reading a story this week that BA were doing ghost flights between Gatwick and Heathrow or something like that? Cause they were,
With slots, it's use it or lose it.
Yeah.
And if people bid and get a slot and they're not prepared then to put a service on it, then it's obviously unfair for other airlines who could use that slot. So if you don't use it, it's going to be taken away from you. But
Right.
of course, in these sort of times when
surely
nobody's travelling, then everyone is in the same boat, and we don't really want to fly empty airplanes around
aircraft,
just for
yeah.
the sake of it. But it has happened in the past, and it will continue to do so.
Wow.
But right now, they, of course, sensibly suspended that rule.
Do airlines pay up front for a slot, Nick? Do you know? Do they kind of pay like a yearly charge to have a slot at an airport? Do you know?
I don't know. Al, do you know?
Yes, in simple terms, they can be traded. I think Oman Air have just bought some Heathrow slots that came up very recently, haven't they? Did they pay something like £72 million for them? I don't know if I've got that figure
Yeah,
just
but I don't know
completely
if
off the
that's
top of
a once-only payment or whether they have to pay a continual fee to keep it.
It's to the best of my knowledge, it's a one-off fee, but you have to reapply each year for your slots. And there have been occasions in the past where people, or airlines rather, have forgotten to put a particular slot on their annual return, and therefore have lost them.
Oh gosh.
That would be a bit of an administrative cock-up then.
Yeah. Especially when you've got people turning up to an airport expecting to go on holiday.
Yes.
Yeah, so it has happened. Most of the slots in the UK and other parts of the world are administered by a company, and basically, I think that company is called something like Airport Administration or something like that, and they administer the slots. If I am correct, that money is just between the organisations, as in the airlines, so the airport don't actually receive that money. The best way you could describe it is it's a bit like a franchise.
Yeah. So in fact, actually, we've had official confirmation of that. So Adam has very kindly been in touch. He's saying you don't pay the airport for a slot. The sums that airlines pay is between themselves when they trade them. And then, yes, you have to apply for them, and there is an admin fee to cover the cost of airport coordination. So there you go.
It's good. I'm telling you, it's good that we have a chat room like
absolutely.
this.
We've got a great chat room. Absolutely, yeah. So anyway, we're going to need to sort of move on now. I'm sorry that we're talking so much about said coronavirus at the moment, but obviously, I'm sure everybody appreciates it's a huge story at the moment. But one of the things I was most aware of, this is a wonderful little community that we're so very lucky to be a part of. But, of course, one of our friends of the show is actually living in Italy, which has sort of accidentally become the epicenter of this crisis, for want of a better word. And I had a chance to chat to her last night, in fact. And, we managed to get a little bit of advice as well from the good APG doctor about what to do. So let's have a little listen. Obviously, big news at the moment is the coronavirus, and our little community, I would say, is a very close one. And for that reason, and that reason alone, I guess, we've all been following what's been going on in sort of Europe quite closely, and more especially from our point of view, Italy. And of course, we have a very lovely correspondent who often sends stuff to us here, who sort of unwittingly has ended up in what I can only describe as the epicenter of what's been going on. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jenny now. Hi, Jenny.
Hello to everybody.
Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate this is probably a slightly strange time for you, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to ask a few questions, really. So, I mean, obviously, the media and things has highlighted clearly that you're essentially on lockdown, but I was interested to know how it's all come about. I mean, so how were you notified, for example? So when did it sort of become clear that things were about to change quite dramatically?
I don't know, it started off about the end of January. I was going to work one morning, and outside a hotel, just as I walked past it, there was all these press people with cameras. And I thought, oh, there must be somebody famous staying there at the moment. And then I discovered that those were the first 2 cases in Italy, 2 Chinese tourists who'd been traveling up and down Italy. And they were the first 2, and they were whisked off instantly. And so that was the end of January. And then in February, there was more news about it gradually. But I suppose it really kicked off about a week ago when in my office, I work for quite a large organization with about 4,000 employees in Rome. And they started to say that, you know, if anybody thought that they shouldn't, that they were at risk, like for the age group, which is certainly my case, or had relatives, they were living with people who had bad health, then they could ask to work from home. So I didn't waste any time about that. I asked straight away if I could work from home. And so I have been working from home for about a week. And so climbing the walls now, but here we are.
So you've gone from that, obviously, and I think it was the north of Italy was sort of affected first. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head when that all sort of really kicked in.
About and then I think it was just was it less than a week ago? They closed down the north basically, and they announced it sort of late in the evening. The Prime Minister comes on, and last night he came on to say that it was closing. 2 nights ago, closing down the whole of Italy, and then last night, even more strictly, has closed down all shops, essentially all commercial activities, except for bars and including bars and restaurants. You can go and buy. You can only go out of your house if you have to buy food, or go to a chemist, or for health reasons, or for some absolutely urgent reason. And so, for example, we're not even allowed to drive down to the seaside where we've got a flat. Even if we go in our own car and stay in the house, we can't do that. And every time you go out, even if you're going to do the shopping, you have to take out a declaration in 2 copies saying why you're going out, signed, and the police can stop you. And today they've fined more than 2,000 people who've been out without a good reason.
Wow. Okay. And so presumably good reason is going out to collect supplies, if you like, for being in isolation.
It's a bit weird, really, because even to go to the supermarket, there's a man on the door, and he's got a mask. There are no masks available, so we just have to go out without masks. But a man on the door of the supermarket, and we have to queue outside a meter. When you're outside, you have to always stay 1 meter distance from people, because that apparently is the minimum distance you have to keep. And then, so there's this queue down the road with everybody 1 meter apart. And I was thinking, it's like, used to read about wartime, queuing up and rationing and things. Although there isn't any rationing, once it's your turn to go into the supermarket, there's plenty of stuff and plenty of toilet rolls if anyone needs
good. Well, for us here in the UK, that is a huge relief, I have to be honest.
There was a run on the biscuits. But
right, biscuits I get, that's fine, it's emergency rations and things like that. So obviously everything's all in lockdown now. Now I know that I think it was from the chat room last week, I remember you saying actually that you would normally, I think, was it next week you were planning to come and visit Mum, obviously, who lives here in Norfolk.
That's right, yes. No, I got a letter from Ryanair. I had my trip with Ryanair, and I got a letter about a week ago saying that they weren't going to be, my flight had already been cancelled, and that they would give me a refund.
Right.
And so, for first time in history, got a full refund paid straight away back into my bank account from Ryanair.
No messing at all. So, I guess it's how long is a piece of string, I guess. How long do you think this is likely to be sort of going on for, certainly? Have they given you any indication, or I guess they don't know yet?
They don't really know. The schools are closed until the 3rd of April. And then they'll just see. In my office, they said they're just discussing it on a weekly basis, but they're assuming we'll all be home till the 3rd of April.
Gosh, okay. So
I get the idea. They're just trying to sort of get the health service up to speed even more and just keep us all indoors so that when we go out again and get ill, if we get ill, then they'll be able to cope with it better.
So, obviously, the most important question, which is really why we wanted to sort of just have an opportunity to catch up with you, is how is everyone? Obviously, you guys in good health? No issues, hopefully, as far as said virus is concerned?
No, we're fine. The only person we heard of was the father of a friend of my daughter. The friend is actually in London, and her father lives in Rome, not too far away, and he's in hospital. And he says he hadn't seen anyone from China or travelled abroad. Right. But that's I don't know anybody else.
No, okay. Well, we're very lucky in that joining us this evening is the very good doctor who we've borrowed from APG just to have a quick chat. And I wondered, obviously, as you're right in the middle of it all, Jenny, is there any question that you would like to ask Dr. Steph while she's here?
Well, I would actually, because here they just keep telling us that we have to wash our hands for 20 seconds and we have to not touch our faces. And it seemed to be sort of rather basic stuff. I wondered if maybe in the States you were getting better information about how you could protect yourself.
Jenny, great question. I'd like to say that there is different information or something more because it seems kind of basic, doesn't it? So just wash your hands for 20 seconds with warm water and soap. If you're going to use any of the gel hand sanitizers, they should be alcohol containing and ideally 60% or higher. And beyond that, just practice other good hygiene. So if you're going to cough or sneeze, you want to do it into kind of the corner of your elbow, or make sure that you cover your mouth with a tissue of some sort. If you do that, then go immediately and wash your hands again. You can't be doing that too often these days. But that's really the basic guidelines for people who are not ill. If you are not sick, if you're not displaying any symptoms, if you haven't had any close contact with anyone known to have coronavirus, COVID-19, there's really no guidance to wear any type of face mask. So all these people you see wearing face masks might not have any real, I guess, science behind that. If you're sick, you should be wearing a face mask because, again, this is all about preventing transmission of the virus through droplets. So droplets, respiratory droplets, coughing, sneezing, that's how you're going to transmit this virus most readily, and being in relatively close contact with folks who are symptomatic and shedding the virus. So if you are ill, and even if you don't know what you're sick with, because it's still cold and flu season, so this could just be regular influenza that you have, it could be some other common cold that you have. Now is the time, though, to take extra precautions. So go ahead and wear that face mask because that will reduce the amount of droplets that you are putting into the air. You probably do want to go ahead and self-quarantine if you have been in contact with someone who is known to be positive, to have tested positive for COVID-19, for coronavirus. If you're not sure if that's you, you want to get in touch with your local, here in the United States, at least, the guidance is get in touch with your primary care doctor, get in touch with a urgent care or an emergency department, an A&E type department. They're suggesting that perhaps you call ahead so that they know that you're coming and they can figure out how to, if they're able to do testing, how they were going to do that without you walking into the building and exposing other people to the virus. So certainly there's ways that are occurring. People are being asked to wait in the parking lot or being escorted into buildings so they don't have to touch any surfaces, or even being tested just outside the building. So
I know in the UK a lot of the advice has been actually that to call so we have like a 111 number rather than the emergency number, the 911.
Sure.
We have a 111 number, and I know that certain testings have been taking place. Actually, they've been doing like what they call drive-by testings, where they come in, they drive into the car, they're tested essentially in their car without leaving the car, and then on they go. Now I know I made a bit of an error, I think, in last week's episode, because I was sort of saying essentially it was like flu, sorry. You were saying it was flu-like symptoms, but it's not flu. So
sure. So two different viruses. So this is a coronavirus, which is actually a family of viruses. They're common. When you're sick, especially as a child, a lot of those illnesses that cause like a common cold, upper respiratory infection, those are caused by coronaviruses. So there's a lot of them out there. This just happens to be a new one that has not infected the human population before. Not sure entirely how it originated, whether it's a mutation from a previous type of coronavirus, or whether it was being harbored in some other animal species prior to making the jump to humans, which certainly that can happen sometimes. So this is not influenza. That's the influenza virus. Totally different. So even if I should not be touching my face there. See how easy it is to do that?
We all do it.
I know, it's terrible. And I'm watching myself on my camera so I could see myself do it in real time. But yes, it's not influenza. The guidance around the world is still to get your flu vaccine because that is still a very real illness. This has not taken over influenza in any way, shape, or form. You still want to protect yourself from that, provide herd immunity, and not spread that illness to people who are susceptible either. So hopefully that answers your question about coronavirus versus influenza.
Yeah, it's, if you think you might be, what are the actual symptoms? So what is it that we're watching out for, if you like, to know whether we need to take further steps?
Sure. So this is a flu-like illness for a lot of people, but there are some differences, and that's why there's been some confusion initially. Is this just a different type of flu or not? The vast majority of people will have some sort of cough, so that's very prevalent with this. I've heard 60 to 80% of people who have coronavirus have a cough. Up to 50% of people have a fever when they first present with the illness, and up to 75% will develop a fever with it at some point. 20 to 40% of people will actually have some shortness of breath. So that's something to look out for. It's very few folks who actually have other upper respiratory type symptoms like sneezing, runny nose, and very few people get gastrointestinal, so stomach issues with this, like 10%.
Which makes the panic buying of toilet rolls all the less sensible, I guess.
Yeah, there's not any. I actually was listening to a discussion with some health experts on the way home today on the news, and that was a question asked directly to them. Is there any sense to run out and buy a whole bunch of toilet paper, toilet rolls? And they said, that seems, no, there's
odd.
no
Yeah.
real good reason to do that.
Indeed. So you think that perhaps you're ticking the boxes with all of the symptoms. I mean, presumably then that is the time that one should be self-isolating.
Exactly. So the name of the game with this particular virus is social distancing, which is why you're seeing so many different things being canceled around the world. So I can speak to what's happening here in the United States right now. You were talking about Italy just a little while ago, as they've been kind of the epicenter in Europe. The thought here is that how things are progressing here, we're essentially 10 to 14 days behind what's happened in Italy in terms of cases and case progression. So there's all of a sudden this very big push to make sure that we're trying to do what we can to limit the spread of the illness. I was explaining, if you were watching us on APG earlier, the episode has not been released yet, so you may very well be watching this first. If you kind of think of a graph, on one axis you have different illnesses of the world that in terms of how contagious they are. On one end you have something that's not very contagious. On the other hand, you have something like measles or chickenpox, which you're around someone who has it and you're going to get it, basically, like it's very contagious. And then on the other axis you have how severe the illness is. So how likely are you actually to get a severe illness where you might actually die from it? And on the bottom end of that is something like, chickenpox for most children who get it. But on the top end of that might be something like Ebola virus. And then, so you kind of look at that.
And I was thinking it's important also to mention perhaps at this stage that, I guess age is a factor here, isn't it? Really, it is. It's yeah. The impact to certain generations is perhaps a bit higher. You're certainly higher risk.
Sure.
Depending on age.
Yeah. So to tie that all in, so this virus falls somewhere. It's fairly transmissible. It's fairly contagious, and then it's still on the lower end in terms of the severity of how bad things could actually be. It's not 100% of people who are getting this illness are dying from it. It's not even, 20%, but we're still kind of figuring out exactly where that actual percentage lies, because certainly not everyone gets tested for it who has the virus. It seems to be that folks who are on the older end of the spectrum, and it kind of goes up by decade. Some of what we've seen have been, if you're, let's start on the good news end of things. So if you're under the age of 10, it's like a 0.01% chance of dying from coronavirus. And going back to where I mentioned, because some of those other illnesses that children often get that are cold and flu-like illnesses are related to coronaviruses. There's some thought that having been exposed to those and having had an illness with a coronavirus recently gives you some weak immunity to this current coronavirus, because they're marginally related to one another. But as you get older, you have those illnesses when you're a child, and then you don't, even though you're exposed to the virus again, you don't have an illness related to it. You don't mount that immune response again. So you lose that protection over time. And since we haven't seen this virus before, the older you are, especially if you have other medical problems, in particular things like diabetes, heart disease, a bunch of others. So other respiratory illnesses, COPD, things like that.
Things
your
like
risk,
pneumonia, stuff like
pneumonia.
that.
Yeah. If you're prone to those types of things, it goes up exponentially. So you have that, 0.1 risk of mortality as a very young child. It goes all the way up to maybe 15% in the above 80 age range. And that's very significant. So above the age of 60, it really starts to go up in terms of folks who have more severe illnesses.
Interestingly, an article I was reading, actually I think it was yesterday, that sort of talked about, because there is obviously a vaccine for things like pneumonia. I mean, is something like that likely to to help, or is it all a bit too late, I guess, for stuff
Well,
like that?
the problem with vaccines is that they take time to develop. They have to be tested. They have to be, it just takes time. So usually you're looking at on the early end of things, maybe a year and a half once something like this comes on the scene. So it's definitely not going to be for this season of this illness. It won't be available that quickly, but hopefully in the future it will be, if it continues to be a problematic virus for us.
Okay. So obviously, if you have got symptoms, I mean, what advice would you give to people in regards to sort of trying to stay well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you're really going to have to take a look at what your symptoms are. You know, if you're one of those folks who just has a mild illness, you have cough, maybe fever, and nothing more along with it, you're probably fine to keep an eye on yourself. Stay home, monitor your situation. Don't go in contact with other people. If it starts to get worse, then you need to seek medical treatment. Certainly, if you're having shortness of breath at any point in time, that's the time to get in touch with your doctor, your local Department of Health, your emergency department, whatever it is that you need to do to keep yourself safe and well. My understanding, and I'll say don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% certain, but is that some people can develop severe symptoms very quickly. So you want to keep a close eye on that. You want to know how you're feeling, how you're doing. If you think you might have coronavirus and you're starting to show symptoms and it's getting progressively worse, that's not the time to wait at home and see if it's going to play itself out. I'm trying to think what else I wanted to say about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking actually if we could sort of round it round more specifically, because I mean, a lot of people who listen to this are travelling all the time as well. I mean, there are people that are flying from. I know there are flight restrictions that have now been put in place between Europe and the US. Interestingly, not between us, which is a bit strange. But
yeah, I mean, I have my own personal feelings on that, which I'll probably stay away from. The intention of all of this is really just to make sure that you're limiting exposure. We talk a lot about just within the medical community trying to flatten the curve. The problem with this virus is that if you have enough sick people, it can actually overwhelm the healthcare infrastructure, which is a lot of what's happened in Italy. There are enough people who are severely ill requiring ventilation, intubation, and there just aren't enough ventilation machines to go around to help all of these people. So it quickly overwhelms the system. It overwhelms any other illnesses that people are coming into the hospital to be treated for. It really pulls resources. So the goal is to not have such a huge spike in people who are sick all at the same time. So it's to try and spread that out so not everyone gets sick altogether.
Now, interestingly, you just mentioned the Italy. Jenny, I wondered if there'd been any restrictions put in place in regard to like the airports near to you.
Well, yes, we've just heard that Fiumicino, the big airport, is going to close Terminal 1 from next Tuesday, the 17th of March, and all flights will go through Terminal 3. And they're going to continue testing people for their temperatures, both arriving and leaving. Whereas Ciampino, the smaller one, will be, they're closing on Saturday to all commercial travel.
Gosh. Well, I'm sure I speak for everybody in the community when we say, please, 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 I hope you and your wonderful family all stay very safe while this is all going on there. And I'd like to say that on behalf of our wonderful community, that we're all thinking of you while you're on lockdown, and let's hope you all stay safe and well.
Yeah, and likewise from us over here in the States, Jenny, certainly we're thinking of all of you guys. You've been on my mind very much so recently with all of this going on, and we're glad to hear that you're healthy and well and safe at this point, because that's the most important thing. Hopefully this is something that does, with a new virus, it's hard to know how it's going to run its course, but hopefully it's something that it does start to quiet down over the next weeks to months, and life can return to normal. But it's great to hear from you, and thanks for all of your insights. We really appreciate hearing that, because we are keeping a close eye on what's happening there in Italy.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Clean hands.
and that is fantastic advice for everybody, isn't it, really? Clean hands, clean hands. My personal thanks to both Jenny and Dr. Steph for doing that for me. I think one of the funniest things I was reading in the chat room during this was, I'm just trying to find it now. There we go. This is from Tony S. He was saying, "Good evening, everyone. Is this the right place for the Plain Medical Talking podcast?" I think that's very appropriate. But as Al actually said in the chat room,
PMT
there's
podcast.
The what? Sorry.
PMT podcast?
That's a whole different thing.
Okay.
We're going to walk away from that car crash. Thanks, Dr. Steph, for that. As Al said, there's so much misinformation out there, and it was great to have a chat with Jenny as well. I'm so glad that she's well. That's the important thing, and they're all on lockdown. So anyway, we're not going to talk about that anymore. Time to move on.
Yeah, so we are going to move things on to the next part of the show, which is, of course, the military segment of news. So if everyone's ready
yes, we're going to bash through this very quickly because we have basically 12 minutes in which to deal with the grey stuff. So good luck, everyone. Here we go. Thanks, Al.
Is that a Welsh chicken?
Something like that. Yeah.
KFC, I think.
Run out of sheep.
And off you go, Carl.
Thank you. So the first news story, we're going to quickly breeze through these first couple of stories. But this first one's on the Gloucestershire Live. And RB-2 stealth bombers returning to RAF Fairford. United States Air Force begins deployment to its bases in Europe. United States Air Force sends Spirit stealth bomber aircraft from the 509th Bomb Wing and the 131st Bomb Wing at Whiteman Air Base, Missouri, to the Azores, saying they will operate out of various military installations in the U.S. European Command's area responsibility. Updated, there's some pictures actually on this story, which Matt may ping up on the screen if you're lucky.
Okay, yes.
Stealth bombers have landed in Portugal as a major deployment of US United States Air Force aircraft. B-2s arrived at Liege Field in the Azores, flying Larges, thank you, for exercises in Europe. They'll be operating on various military bases in Europe, leading to speculation they will again return to RAF Fairford. I'm sure Jonathan Warner hopes they do. So they are sent here as part of the United States commitment to NATO and its allies, and there's no official confirmation of any deployment to RAF Fairford at the moment, and the USAF does not.
They arrived today, did they not?
Oh, did they? Probably did. Jonathan will be the best person to ask about that.
Yeah, I think 2 arrived.
Oh, we got 2.
He's just sent me. Hang on, I've been sent a WhatsApp. One moment, caller.
Actually, I'm going to have to lose my subscription to the not interested in military now if this turns out to be true on time.
Oh no, your secret's out.
Yes,
secret's out, Al.
I think they came under the call sign of Flossie 1 and Flossie 2. That's why I was interested.
So B-2 stealth bombers were last at RAF Fairford in August last year, actually, on August the 27th to September the 20th last year. There's also actually with this story, for those of you who may or click on the links that we put in the show notes, there is actually a really good video as well which goes with this story of the B-2 as well, or the U-2 I should say, spy plane. There we go. So for those who are watching on YouTube, that little picture just popped up on the screen there.
Yeah.
Moving on quickly to the next story. Captain Al.
Okay, very quickly then. This comes from the BBC News website. 6 RAF jets intercept Russian aircraft heading for Scottish coast. 6 RAF fighter jets were scrambled to intercept Russian aircraft as they approached British airspace, the military of defence has said. The Russian bombers were tracked heading towards the northwest coast of Scotland on Saturday. It prompted the Air Force to deploy 3 pairs of Typhoons from its Quick Reaction Alert programme. 2 pairs left from RAF Lossiemouth in Moray, while the 3rd flew from RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire. Flying in formation, 2 pairs approached the aircraft before withdrawing, while the 3rd pair forced them to change their course. The Russian aircraft were later identified as Tupolev Tu-142 Bears, which are used both as strategic bombers and long-range maritime patrol planes. The total number of Russian aircraft involved in the incident has not been revealed. RAF Lossiemouth crews on standby for quick alert instance. This was a routine response to Russian aircraft approaching UK airspace, and was coordinated with several other NATO allies, an RAF spokesman said. Well done, boys.
Well, why do they keep doing this, though? What have I missed?
Because they're rubbing it in our faces that they've got an aircraft that was first flown in July 1968.
Right.
And it's still flying now.
All right. Well, like the 737. The interesting thing is you can't actually force an aircraft to do anything when they're in international airspace, so I'm not too sure about the accuracy of that. And they could be just doing what we would do over the ocean, military maneuvers. They could be monitoring NATO fleets. They could be searching for submarines, all that kind of stuff. But there's nothing you can actually do unless they penetrate your 12-mile ring around the country.
In your years...
Nick, am I also right... Sorry. Am I right in thinking that these bears can also drop very long antenna to communicate with Russian submarines that may be a very long way from Russia?
Yeah, exactly right. It is an extremely long antenna, and it's to transmit a very VLF, very low frequency transmissions that will penetrate water and allow them to communicate directly with their submarines underwater.
So it may well be, for example, that there are Russian submarines off the coast of, say, the United States that they need to communicate with, and this would be probably one of the ways that the Russians can do it. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I don't know where the submarines would be, but this certainly is.
No, it was an example of it being a long way away from Russia.
Exactly, yes, that's very true.
Did you ever see any of these in your flying career with Royal Air Force, Nick, when you were flying?
Yeah, many times. I'm 36 live intercepts, and the great vast majority were bears. What is interesting about these intercepts was that I saw some video taken from inside the bear that was posted on Facebook, and the guys were filming the typhoons on their wings. Which was quite an interesting thing.
As you do.
That's one to show the kids when you get home, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That must have been quite amusing for the Air Force crews to see that.
Yeah.
Because in your day, Nick, obviously, apart from anything else, the technology, the social media wasn't there. So, to see the other side of the equation.
Exactly right. And I think on one of the pictures we can see here, we can see a guy with the camera at the window of these bears. Yeah, very interesting. Quite right. But not really a Cold War anymore.
No, that's
or
true.
Shouldn't be.
No. So moving from one older style aircraft to another slightly older style aircraft on the next story.
Well, quite right. And this should be an aircraft that's, in fact, it is in many museums around the world. But Japan has only just started to say so long to the F4 Phantom, or sayonara to the F4 Phantom. The F4 Phantom 2, of course, because there was an earlier one. And Japan has been flying one particular airframe for more than 50 years.
Wow.
So they're getting rid of their RF-4EJ Phantom 2s, which is quite a bit of history, really. The last country to operate them is part of their armed service. And the last six, they're reconnaissance aircraft, these equipped with cameras, of course, for doing reconnaissance on the enemy or whatever you want to take pictures of. But the last six flew for the last time on March the 9th, and the country will retire its entire Phantom fleet by the end of the year. And meanwhile, it's pursuing their new fighter. Like a lot of countries, they are acquiring the new F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. So for those pilots, it'll be a very exciting step from the old F-4, very old F-4 in their case, up to the most modern of modern, the F-35. So fantastic.
Great. It's a great aircraft, isn't it? It's you must have many fond memories of said aircraft.
Apparently there are 3 countries still flying the fantastic Phantom, spelt with a PH, as we Phantom pilots like to. Japan, South Korea and Turkey. So
first flew in May 1958.
There you go.
Phantom
brilliant
2.
Brilliant aeroplane.
Yeah. So moving on to the last story in that, and this one is on Flight Global. Never be gutted, he missed the font.
It's his favourite font, isn't it?
Yeah, so for those of you who are interested in the latest Air Force One variant, Boeing starts Air Force One modifications of the 747-8. So Boeing has begun modifications, well, it's got plenty of time on its hands, I suppose, to the first of 2 commercial 747-8 airliners, which are to be turned into the US Air Force VC-25B aircraft. Known by its Air Force One call sign when the US President flies on board, 2 VC-25Bs are to operate as the USA's top executive transports for the next 30 years. Modifications are being done at Boeing's San Antonio, Texas facilities, says the US Air Force. The first phase of aircraft modification involves cutting out large
Hose that man down. Get the J's fluid out straight away.
If we're here next week, it'll be a miracle. So, the first modification involves cutting out large
twice, apparently.
areas of skin and structure.
Toss it here, isn't it?
Yes.
I'd say put the fan on, Matt, honestly.
Yeah, it's all right.
So the super panels contain structural upgrades and cutouts for the VC-25B lower lobe doors, include internal air stairs for mission requirements. The US Air Force is working to replace its current fleet of presidential aircraft to 747-200 based VC-25A aircraft delivered in 1991, with obviously these 2 nice shiny 747-8s. These were originally built for Russian carrier Transaero, which filed for bankruptcy back in 2015 before it could take delivery of the aircraft. The commercial airliners need extensive retrofits to be transformed into the VC-25B configuration. For example, the 2 air stair doors, one forward of the wing and one behind the wing, did not come as part of the commercial airliner configuration. According to US Air Force acquisition documents released in July 2018, the retractable air stairs are to allow the aircraft to enplane passengers and crew without needing to rely on ground-based staircases. The commercial 747, it's almost like we've got Al here. The commercial 747-8s have been stripped of its many typical components as well, says the US Air Force. Boeing prepared the 2 aircraft for modifications by starting to remove the commercial interiors, engines, auxiliary power units, and numerous secondary system components, says the service. Additionally, Boeing placed a sophisticated jacking and crib mechanism, are they playing cards, under each aircraft to reduce structural stress for the initial modification phases. The V-25B is to be retrofitted so that the President of the USA can carry on running the federal government, including command and controlling the US military while in flight. As such, detailed information about the aircraft's components and capabilities are currently classified or tightly controlled. Are you right there, Al?
Yes, I've just been joined by my son.
So am I right in saying that the President will be flying around in ex-Russian aeroplanes?
I suppose that is true.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should go there.
Oh, really? I think we should go there big time.
I'm very concerned.
What do you think about him changing the colour scheme? Because obviously they're going to change the colour scheme of this aircraft from the current to what it is.
Yeah,
on
I
this
rather like
picture
the
here.
red stars it had on before.
Quite. Oh dear, never mind. It's one of those. As I say, they've got plenty of time on their hands, haven't they, to be able to sort of get this started, really.
So this one won't be able to air-to-air refuel.
No, they've not had
the
that
other one?
capability
The other one
yet.
is?
Oh,
They
yes.
could, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Actually, these 2 brand new spanking shiny aircraft are due to be delivered by December 2024.
Right. Gosh.
So that's when we should see
Will
these.
who still be in power then?
Oh, what, that guy?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Perhaps he'll change the constitution so he can have
It might
more
be
than
you
2
by then,
terms.
Nick.
Might be.
I don't think so. I think there's one
not
big
eligible.
problem. But,
Yeah. Not eligible, it would seem.
yeah.
Actually, to be fair, we'd all want Al to be president of the US, wouldn't we?
Right.
Captain
Okay.
Al.
Well, he needs to
I
be
think I
president
prefer-
of something.
I think
yeah.
he'd prefer to be prime minister personally. I think that might be more suitable.
I think he'd make a great dictator.
Right. Okay.
Anyway,
yes, he's not commenting. Has he dropped off the call?
he's gone off mute.
Well,
Oh no, there he is.
Oh, here he
yeah,
is.
I am here. I've just had one of those technological disaster moments because earlier on in the show, whilst I was joined by Josh, my son, I popped one of my ear pods into one of his ears so he could listen to what was going on. So just a few moments ago, he sidled up to me and basically tapped on the ear pod to say, "Can I share one?" Thereby disconnecting the call.
Yes, of course, yes.
And
The
now
joys of AirPods. Yeah.
Yeah, and now I've rejoined the chat, and my phone seems to have decided that I'm driving. So it says safe driving mode. Your video is stopped. Please let us know when you finish talking.
Al, what model of phone is this?
Anyway, moving on. It's irrelevant. Yeah.
Okay.
It's better than yours. That's all we need to know. At least my phone's not spying on me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, the main man Mikey says by the time this has been delivered, it'll be a different president and the colour won't be changed.
Actually, Tanya W says quite a good point. Actually, Prime Minister like Baldrick.
I don't know what to do with that information.
I'd love to see Baldrick as Prime Minister.
Absolutely. I mean, definitely
I've got a plan.
Yeah.
Do not despair, sir, for I have a cunning plan.
Yes. Is it a cunning one? Cunning as a fox studying cunning at the University of Oxford. Yes. No. Not that I've watched a lot of Blackadder's Ghost Forth or anything like that. Anyway, guys, we're out of time. We need to wrap up, I'm afraid.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
So
otherwise your food will be cold.
Well, quite absolutely, and that can't happen.
We're going to say a big thanks to everyone who's joined us on the show tonight. Big thanks to all the chat room members, all the YouTube viewers, and not forgetting as well everyone who downloads the show as an audio podcast each week. So week ahead, quickly, what's up going on with you this week, Matt? You're coaching somewhere?
Yeah, it's a quiet week this week, so not a lot going on, I suppose. It's just sort of like school contracts and swimming contracts. That's all I got this week.
Exciting
for the time being.
Yes, hopefully, yes. Hopefully, get one more week out of it before we're all in lockdown.
Captain Nick, obviously, your diary had to be brought here on a low loader because it's so full. It was
very full. Yes, absolutely.
It was. Yeah, I was going off to Hamburg next week to lecture the Royal Aeronautical Society, and they've said that they're no longer holding those meetings for the moment. So
So are you playing with your balls this week? Oh, bowls, I mean.
Nope, the season has yet to start. The ball bowling playing season.
Oh, I've got a headache.
Captain Al, dare I ask what you're doing this week, or does it involve a curry?
Yeah, probably a curry.
Well, I may well have a curry. My week is fairly fluid at the moment, so I'll let you know next week what I did this week.
Okay, good.
Oh, brilliant.
Excellent.
By the way, there's an APG tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the afternoon UK time, or 9 a.m. in the morning US time.
Yes, because they need all the help they can get, obviously.
I'm actually off this. I have a week off.
You have a week off? Who authorised that?
I'm now officially on holiday.
Wow.
So I've got next week off. So I'm going to be doing lots of family-orientated stuff,
Lovely.
catching up with various people.
Come on, you can be trendy. You can, instead of calling it holiday, just say you're self-isolating.
I'm self-isolating this week. I'm going to be eating
Go
lots of junk
snowflake
food.
on me. Go millennial.
Our producer is saying that given the fact that he says he's going to tell us next week what's happening, does that mean Al has just confirmed for next week?
Oh, well, good. Al's going to join us
Excellent.
next week.
Lovely.
Brilliant.
We'll see you next
Thanks,
week.
Al.
Fantastic.
Social media links. Don't forget to catch up with us on the PTUK website, www.planetalkinguk.com. Also, don't forget, if you want to have your picture on the green screen behind us here in the studio, don't forget you can send your picture to us via our WhatsApp number, which is +44 757 22 49166. You can send us your picture there, or you can email the show podcast at planetalkinguk.com and send us some audio feedback, because we love your audio feedback. So if you're holed up in a room somewhere because you can't get out because you're self-isolating for 3 years,
right, yes.
then send us some audio feedback.
Good. If you've been living under a stone, then obviously you need to take yourself to the Airline Pilot Guy. Is it airlinepilotguy.com? Is it?
It is.
The
official
website. Yeah, absolutely. As I say, Carlos mentioned Patreon. Take yourself to Patreon. Spell it for me, please, because I'm rubbish.
Patreon.
Very good, excellent. You can become a patron, donate to the show, and we use your very kind donations to basically keep the show on the air.
And don't forget, if you do your shopping via Amazon, like we all do, and I know I definitely do, and Gemma has done on many occasions this week, you can take yourselves over to our website and click on the Amazon link and do your shopping in there. It doesn't cost you a penny, but it does give us a little referral fee.
Certainly
and
does.
helps
You find out what we're shopping if we use your
I
link.
do. And Nick, I cannot believe that you brought that last week.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy any more using your link, because it's just too embarrassing.
Honestly, how did you fit that in your car?
It doesn't tell us who.
Well, it's how I fit it in my trousers.
Right, okay, anyway.
Difficult.
And on that bombshell, it is time to end. Al, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Al. You're a legend.
You're more than welcome. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks very much for the invite, and I'll let Josh say goodbye as well.
Thanks,
Bye,
Josh. So from all of us here in the PTUK studios, from Captain Al, and have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy your Sunday roasts, and goodbye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.